Give us any chance, we'll take it. Read us any rule, we'll break it. We're gonna make our dreams come true.
Welcome back to Night After Night and yet another top 5 list of Laverne Shirley episodes. I'm Chris Jayawardena. Hello. Heading into season 5 was a beastly endeavor with the Happy Days 2-parter and last crossover for the series, but after a couple of rocky spots, I ended up loving this season. A severe ratings dip caused by a change in the schedule pushed the writers and cast into some bold and experimental territory. The result is something that is, in my opinion, definitively Laverne Shirley. So much so that it's hard for me to even narrow down my list of honorable mentions, with The Wedding, 4th Annual Shots, The Diner, Right to Light, and We're in the Army Now as others I'd throw at anyone wanting to give this series and season a try. But for the actual honorable mentions, You Push Me Too Far ends up being almost like a coda to the quartet of High Neighbors Book 1 and 2, Driving Test, and Squiggy in Love. From its water balloon zaniness to its how did they get away with this on television footgasm, it gives us weird laughs that's buffered by a tragicomic scene of breaking through Squiggy's toxic masculinity. It's a zesty episode, worthy of at least a clip right here.
Hello there, Len. I just wanted to tell you that, well, I'm awful sorry for some of the terrible things I did and said to you, and, well, you'll always be my best friend.
Meanwhile, the infamous Why Did the Firemen is an episode that really shouldn't work as well as it does, given it is a incredibly predictable heartbreak. Yet Ted Danson's stellar chemistry with Penny Marshall, the emotionally wrenching third act, all the bits of funny cue before the fall, I can't deny getting a tug of the old heartstrings when I watched it. I've often said this show works best when it's earnest and real, and this is perhaps the most brutal example of that. But both these episodes also capture something consistent throughout most of the entire season, which is that somehow they finally landed the tightrope walk of tone with way greater consistency than ever before. And now, the evidence of such in this top 5 episodes of Laverne and Shirley, Season 5. A cavalcade of cameos and another celebration of sisterhood, the Beatnik Show strikes a chord between dynamic, familiar, but with a hearty smile. Another episode where the girls have a rift between them that can only be resolved by deep friendship and quoting a certain particular poem. It meanwhile has the groovy cats of the butter cocoon that create this sort of interesting alternate universe that the characters begin to inhabit. In many ways, the Beatnik bar itself actually reminded me of the Chameleon Brothers' coffee bar in Rocco. But this level of parody gives it a great cartoonish palette for Shirley's descent into full beat. I mean, heck, she doesn't just get one, but 2 Ellen Ginsberg posters.
This is the universe. This is a leaf. This is the universe. It's a leaf. It's the universe. It's the universe. It's the universe. It's the universe.
Seeing this exploration of Shirley Feeney adds layers to a character who last season was so flip-flopped, it was getting hard to keep things straight for me. Rather than defining her by a find a man, be a good girl type of character, we get to see Shirley seek something out for herself. Something that fulfills her, spiritually, creatively. It's almost like a companion piece to It's a Dog's Life last season. And here, Cindy Williams starts to do new things with the characterization, the physical gestures, all that kind of great stuff. It gives a refinement that we actually get to see carried on in the show from here on out, especially in Season 6. With the plot centered around Laverne's fear of losing a roommate to the beatnik scene, it never becomes about changing Shirley back. It instead ends up being about Laverne finding a way to reach out to her friend and say, I miss you, I love you, and just trying to reconnect. It's remembering to meet in the middle, accepting the different paths that we have to take for ourselves. And inevitably, their companionship is once again proved to be never-ending. And how this comes to be with Laverne once again turning to Lenny for advice is particularly sweet.
You put up with all of that just because of Squiggy?
Oh, listen, I would have done anything to let him know I still wanted to be his friend. I wouldn't say this if he was here, but I really love that little guy, Laverne.
It's a moment of friendship that really showcases the development, how the girls have gone from tolerating to accepting to welcoming, and in some cases now, seeking out Lenny and Squiggy for either advice or companionship. The scene and its message allows Laverne to grow along with Shirley in her own way, standing by her difference in opinion, yet without breaking the sisterly bond that she has with her best friend in the whole wide world.
Just think of it, Laverne. We get to spend eternity surrounded by the good and the pure.
Hello.
Another dip into the fantastical, the dream scene visions of heaven and hell in this episode are so delightfully in character. It's a wild time full of background jokes, hammy acting, camp set dressing, and just going whole hog into the concept. While Shotgun Wedding started the season off with a bang that said, "Get ready for a wild season," this episode is the turning point where anything goes, setting the stage for a crazy, emotional, self-aware season to come. A humongous highlight here is Dick Shawn, a legendary and sometimes infamous comedian whose death was in itself a humongously wild story. Shawn's performances bring a sparkling energy to the proceedings that seemingly give permission to Penny and Cindy and everyone else to just go nuts.
Hi, Carmine.
Angel face. No, I meant her. It's an old habit I picked up downstairs.
Also a blast, the dream visions of Laverne and Shirley's friends and family. While not necessarily subtle performances most of the time, the cast in this episode is invited to take the characterizations to 11, be it the overt goofiness of Michael and David, the charming dry wit delivery of Eddie, or the crabby old folk shtick of Betty and Phil.
Dirty money!
They absolutely bring every little bit of goofy fun to the concept, with Joel Zwick's direction letting them loose and the fun script from Al Idekman giving them a playground to put on a hell of a show. Penny and Cindy lead the charge through this dreamscape of theological hilarity, though, as their banter is consistently sharp both in dreams and in the waking world. More than that, it lets these talented people behind the making of the show express themselves with a smirk and a smile that is constantly endearing to me. And both Heaven and Hell have props, serving up subtle background humor, which becomes a staple through this season, in my opinion. As per usual, I have a tendency when it comes to the fun episodes. I prefer the more crazy, the genre-heavy episodes of Laverne and Shirley, because it allows the unexpected to seep into its fibers. I may laugh at an episode that I just enjoy, but it's ones like Upstairs Downstairs that have me smiling afterwards for months, thinking back on locking horns, being carried away by the village people, asking for a sip of milk and Pepsi, or the devilish laugh of a phone company representative. Now, not wanting to be sent to the bad place, I must tell the truth and be honest and put it on this list.
Leonard, a gunshot! The Huns are attacking!
Oh, no, not the Huns.
Don't just stand there, man! Grab your helmets! This is an attack! I shall lead the troops astride my trusty steed, Steve. Don't dally, man! Bring the dogs! The dogs! Are the troops ready? We shall charge!
Even in a season with an actual character death, David L. Lander easily is the one who actually runs away with Season 5 as the most consistent, heavy-hitting actor. Putting together nuances, line delivery, scene chewery, God, it just all culminates in this absolute winner of a boys-focused episode. Penny Marshall returns again to direct, which, in my opinion, is incredibly fitting given that David was one of the main forces that pushed her to become the legendary director that she was. Moreover, David's Madhouse Squiggy allows for expanded material to come out of both the exasperated Carmine, which is one of my personal favorite Carmines, and the desperate, worried Lenny, which is a genuinely good Lenny. Probably putting it best, Duke of Squigman's tone and tempo is in the series' top form, because it focuses on a few dedicated scenes that allows comedy to build and grow, then hit both zinger and heartfelt punchlines. This combination of a tight script, Penny's pitch-perfect direction, allows for conclusions to every sequence that leave you feeling satisfied and yet ready to move on to the next scene. It's emotional and satirical dynamite all throughout it.
The winking of an eyelid. The dropping of a handkerchief. The throwing of a brick. These are all ways a woman has of saying, "Thank you, bub, for being a man."
No, she was aiming to kill, Squig.
The episode most of all, though, takes Squiggy, an archetype that's incredibly difficult to sympathize with most of the time, and makes his existential nature a heartbreaking reflection of mental issues, emotional trauma, and coping mechanisms. Originally created as a joke about the jerks that David and Michael went to school with, Lander's version of Squiggy here is deeper, he's more refined, he's filled with believable delusions of grandeur. This Duke alter ego is a telling sign into his psychology, where the confident swagger of Andrew Squigman turns into a power fantasy, where prestige is in his wake, and even in battle, he has his best friend Lenny at his side. Which brings us to Lenny's part in Duke of Squigman, probably one of the best performances Michael McKean's given to the show. He's the best friend to the end in ways that warm and break your heart in equal measure, singing a lullaby to soothe his friend back to sleep, or the vow to change the world instead of Squiggy. What I've come to love about the Lenny and Squiggy friendship as it's developed all the way even through Season 7, which we just finished our recordings for, it's a complicated relationship that only these two understand. It's sometimes abusive and often immature, but they are a unit unto themselves. Nobody else gets them. They get each other. In the way we see the love that Lenny has for his deluded friend, it makes a fitting, perfectly weird kind of sense.
I'm trying to keep my eye on him so he don't go out and hurt himself, but I can't because I'm always out in the alley pretending to water the horse. Except there's no horse in the alley. It's really a counter named Steve in the kitchen. Jeez,
that's all right. You sit down.
Ultimately, I love this episode for its hilarity and its intelligence. And it's another sign that Season 5 is the zenith of the Milwaukee Years.
Some of theirs. Here, drink some of it.
All over. You got it all over the poor man's suit. I can't.
Beware the bald man.
Beg pardon?
Take this. Trust no one. Beware the bald man.
This show's relationship with two-parters is fascinating. There are definitely a few that absolutely benefit from going beyond 20-something minute episodes, such as The Festival, and then there's others like The Cruise that don't really earn their runtime for me. Season 5 ends up getting multiple. It begins with the bizarro shotgun wedding crossover with Happy Days, later continues with the military comedics and physical comedy of We're in the Army Now, but easily my favorite of the two-parters this season is Moose Jaw Express, a murder mystery, spy thriller mashup that hits hilarious beats, gives some really genuine suspense, and amps everything once more to that delicious 11. What really ties it all up in a bow is the connective tissue throughout. The Easter egg hunt scene at the beginning features a recently married Frank and Edna just being essentially doting parents on their girls. It lulls us into this fun sense of security as the train segment begins. But then, with their very own Mr. Body dropping into their room and giving them the secret microfilm, it's often an egghead hunt of a different color altogether.
Lake. Yeah, there's a mountain. Yeah. It's a rocket ship. Yeah, and there's another mountain.
That the mystery itself involves secret rocket ship photographs brings this tale right into that sweet spot where the film noir, the murder mystery, and the spy movie had a tendency of converging in the 50s and the early 1960s. But don't get me started on that. We have a MacGuffin, a warning about who not to trust, then with this location, the girls are in jeopardy until the train finally arrives at its destination, or they solve the case. This is genuine good stuff. With another bunch of cameos, bit parts, and gags, this episode seamlessly glides from joke to tension and back again. Understand that one thing comedy and horror have very much in common is the build-up and release. Every sequence uses an array of jokes to build a laugh while having an undercurrent of, who's that back there, watching? Or creating a poisoning scenario that's legitimately terrifying the longer it goes on. I mean, come on, Laverne, you're smarter than that.
Case!
Before he died, he said, beware of the bald man.
And everyone in this episode is firing on all cylinders. Lenny and Squiggy going full Holmes and Watson plays on their now typical constant buffoonery with an edge of seriousness. As was said before, this season became experimental. The way it's reflected in episodes like this are really one reason I am still shocked this didn't get viewers back to the show. But sometimes you just don't know what you're missing out on until it's gone. I also haven't talked enough this time around about how great Joel Zwick is on this season. I praised him a lot for season 4, but here you were able to see him more confident, more daring, and working to match the give it all you got spirit that clearly the writers and cast are putting into this entire season. He's an actor's director, but that also means he gives them room to breathe. It helps to block the scenes out, that it's clear, is able to have nuance. And sometimes when you're an actor's director, you just have to know when to adjust something, or get out of an actor's way and let the painter paint. Finally, when the reveal takes place and the showdown happens in the storage car, it's another spectacular bit of physical comedy, with some genuine thrills and surprises, as well as a lean into the genre trappings with gusto. And at last, the climax brings it all home. I love this episode. It's special in a way that very few in the series have been for me. And hopefully, you're going to give it another shot yourself.
All right, who's next? Andrew Squigman.
At the time of recording this top 5, I have gone through 7 seasons of Laverne Shirley. And one thing I think I miss the most in the California years is the writing of Chris Thompson. Regularly cited as one of the best folks working on the show, his obituaries ended up including loving quotes from friends and colleagues, along with his scripts being good, if not great, most of the time. That being said, I have no idea how he's the guy credited for the bully show, though that does also make me wonder if he wanted Laverne to beat the shit out of Biff and maybe actually do the whole grindhouse vengeance thing at the end. Even still, Chris Thompson also gave us the driving test, Airport 59, and What Do You Do with a Drunken Sailor? And this was his last gig on the show before he went on to create the seminal classic Bosom Buddies. And easily, I would say Testing is his best for Laverne and Shirley.
Are you paranoid?
I'm German.
Tell me, Andrew, how do you feel about being a truck driver?
Well, it's better than what I've done before.
What was that?
I was a child.
What this episode does best for me is making characters funny without making fun of them. When you see Squiggy's anxieties, the shakes from Lenny's insecurity, Shirley's frantic revisionism, the pitiful pessimism out of Laverne, it's all taken on with a smirk that's never about saying we, the audience, are better than them. And the psychiatrist, Dr. Matthew Gentry, is a compassionate, caring character whose blank with a personality approach creates a wonderful mirror for each of these characters to be reflected back to the audience and to themselves. It shows everyone's struggles in an exaggerated light that's relatable and poignant.
Oh, and now the news. Dateline Shots Brewery. Tomorrow morning, all Shots personnel will begin a series of mandatory psychological examinations.
You're gonna give us psychological tests?
Conducting the interviews will be a Dr. Matthew Gentry, MD, PhD, SINCERELY.
That's sincerely. Sincerely, Max Shaw.
Well, at least he's sincere.
Interesting to me, the setup for the episode is that the psych evaluations are some company-mandated thing that may lead to firings in the brewery. With the history of Mr. Schatz being such a jerk boss to the employees in prior episodes, as well as the weaponizing of Shirley against her coworkers during Lonely in the Middle, this would make a lot of sense to me. That Gentry ends up being a source of honest analysis upon these characters who sees the everyman in them all is a truly Marshall-verse take on psychiatry and psychological analysis, and in so doing creates what could have been, in my opinion, the best final episode of the show.
I think I failed.
Oh, gee,
No.
you poor lug, you. How do you feel?
I feel thirsty.
Season 5 is jam-packed full of high-concept episodes, be it the girls nearly getting married to Fonzie and Richie, to a very special episode about alcoholism, to the girls joining the army, tragic episode about death and grief. They even had an actual bear on set. It has new locations in almost every episode, constantly fresh ideas, even in the lesser ones. And everyone on board puts in 150% to make it as good as it can be. But what makes Testing stand out is that it essentially culminates the building of our understanding of these characters, celebrates their quirks while sympathizing with their pain, and turns it all into a closing argument as to why Laverne, Shirley, Lenny, and Squiggy deserve a place in our hearts and on our television sets.
Yeah, he was sure a nice guy, wasn't he? You know?
Certainly was.
And you know what he told me?
What?
He told me that I could go crazy on my first date.
I doubt that very much.
I've said before you could easily do a Laverne and Shirley movie focused on the girls and the boys with the high neighbor expanded universe, but another take could be to focus on their blue-collar struggles, their relationships, and how they abide, like the dude. Hear me out, this is what you do. Start with Society Party, you go into High Neighbor, take Mother Knows Worst, Lonely in the Middle, Driving Test, Visit to the Cemetery, 4th Annual Shots Talent Show, then conclude with Testing. And you honestly have yourself a poignant story of a found family, striving to succeed when the odds are against them, and adapting to the hard knocks of life. While there are great episodes still to come in Season 6 and 7 to talk about, I feel like this is where Laverne and Shirley peaked. It's why I can say that this will be my last top 5 for the show, dropping the scale down because not only do I lack the time to commit to these videos from here on out, but also for me, I already know it's not going to get any better than this. This is arguably the best season of the show. The Milwaukee Years of Laverne and Shirley took a concept as simple as 2 working gals from an inner city of the Midwest and blew it up into a delightful, hilarious, poignant, and sometimes deep show, featuring concepts of community, about dealing with our families, finding growth through the connections we make, holding fast to our ideals in the face of pressure, learning to let go and change when needed, and that in the dark winters and the blazing summers, doing it our way means taking on the world with the people who mean the most to us. I don't know if I'd say it's my favorite sitcom, but Laverne and Shirley has finally become one of my favorite television shows of all time. Thank you for watching. We'll see you around, in another place, another time.